Hello guys, another week has passed and here is a new roundup of urban news from around the world. And if you are new to the channel, I make these episodes weekly, so subscribe not to miss the future content. And before we start, I'd like to thank to all my amazing Patreon supporters. The Estonian capital Tallinn will temporarily stop trolleybus traffic. In general, the city doesn't plan to abandon them completely, but instead wants to order 40 new units. A tender for them is scheduled to take place in the coming weeks. Until they arrive, the city decided to use the moment to completely rebuild the infrastructure so that the new trolleybuses could start immediately using new catenary wires and power stations. The trolleybuses are scheduled to stop operating this fall. Until then, instead of trolleybuses, the routes will be served by electric buses and maybe diesel buses also, I guess. And this news looks a bit confusing to me. According to local publicity, they want to abandon the current trolleybuses as soon as possible because they are very old and have exhausted their resources. Of course, they are not brand new, but to me they don't look so weak that they can work for a few more years. In general, I guess it makes sense to upgrade the entire infrastructure at once, because it would probably be cheaper than if the process were to be stretched over the years. But at the same time, there are examples of cities around the world where trolleybus operation was temporarily suspended under very similar circumstances, but was never restored and people still use regular buses. So I am deeply concerned and keep fingers crossed that suspension of trolleybuses in Tallinn will be really temporary and the comeback will happen as planned. In Porto, Portugal, they launched a new section of the D metro line, which was extended by 3.1 km from the previous end station Santo Ovidio by 3 more stations south to Villa di Este. One station, Manuel Leao, is located in a tunnel, while the rest of extension runs above the ground at elevated level, including spectacular 400-meter-long bridge structure. The total construction cost is 206 million euros, and for the first 3 days, a new line was free to ride, allowing the public to test it. Next year, construction work is also expected to be completed on the 3.5 km long purely underground inner city line G, which will connect the city center regional train station with the future Casa da Musica interchange, providing connections to the current A, B, C and E lines, as well as the new H line in a few years. The Spanish company CAF will supply tramcars for the new streetcar system in the American city of Omaha, Nebraska. By the way, a question from the comments: how to pronounce its name correctly, CAF or CAF? I'm really not sure, so what do you think about it? The half-million city of Omaha has been actively developing in recent years and plans to launch a 5-kilometer streetcar line in the city center in 2027. And CAF or CAF is to supply 6 trams for the city, as well as related depot equipment and special tools. The contract also provides an option to increase the number of trams by another 29 units in the future, and is estimated at around 50 million euros. The wagons are to be 3-sectional, completely low-floor, and will be equipped with batteries for running on areas without a contact network. In general, CAF has been working in the United States since 1998 as production facilities in Elmira, New York, and has experience in cities such as Kansas City, Cincinnati, Houston, Sacramento, Pittsburgh, and Boston. Next, we move on to the city of Łódź, Poland, where after several years of reconstruction, they reopened a suburban tram line connecting it to the neighboring town of Konstantinov. This line was stopped in 2019 because of very poor track conditions, and in 2022 its reconstruction began with a total budget estimated at 19 million euros and with the financial support of the European Union. In addition to renovating the tracks, substations and stuff, stops, several new bridges were built, and the traffic control system was modernized. The line has a total length of 7 kilometers. Most of the line is single track and runs sideways on a separate right-of-way, while in the center of Constantinov it runs in the street space. Brazil's capital city of Sao Paulo is planning to announce a tender for the purchase of new subway trains. The winner of the €672 million tender to supply 44 new trains for the Sao Paulo metro will be announced on September 30. Half of the new fleet will operate on the Line 2 extension, which is expected to open in 2026 or 27, and the rest on Lines 1 and 3. In Prague, they started the long-awaited construction of the tram lines on Wenceslas Square, which will allow trams to return to its upper part for the first time since 1980. Back then, trams were removed from the square because of the subway, but as it turns out later, the subway wasn't a complete replacement for the tram, as it was mainly used for long-distance travel, while the tram is more convenient for shorter trips. This project is also aimed at the overall revitalization of the square and will last for about 3 years. There will be also planted new trees and arranged an underground reservoir for collecting rainwater. In addition, the amount of space for cars will be reduced. The 550-meter-long track with 2 pairs of stops will connect the current lines on Jędrzyska and Wodiczkowa streets with the tracks leading to the National Museum. Trams will also directly connect Wenceslas Square with the nearby Vinogradska and Szkretowa streets. Officials say that around 30,000 people are expected to use the new lines daily. Of course, the reconstruction will affect many tram lines, so residents will have to face some inconvenience while the work is underway, but it should get much better afterwards. Meanwhile, an important change has taken place in Vancouver, where they have abolished minimum parking requirements for all land uses throughout the city. Currently, minimum parking requirements exist in all areas of Vancouver outside of downtown and the Broadway planning area, requiring developers to provide a certain number of off-street parking spaces based on set rates tied to the number of residential units and/or floor area. These requirements often lead to developers being forced to build large underground parking garages, which increases the cost of projects and potentially makes them less viable, while the need for parking continues to decrease as a result of improved public transportation. This should also help the city to achieve its transportation goals and simplify the process of obtaining construction permits. The abolition of minimum parking requirements doesn't mean a ban of the construction of new parking garages, and developers should still provide parking where and when they see it necessary, as in the case of multi-story residential projects. Abolishing the minimum number of parking spaces could also potentially reduce the cost of housing. Polish regional rail operator Koleje Mazowieckie has signed a new €750 million contract with a Stadler for the supply of 50 trains and related maintenance. Each of 5-car Stadler fleet trains should accommodate up to 600 passengers, including 279 seated ones, and can accelerate up to 160 km per hour. A large part of interior is low floor, which makes it easier to access for passengers with reduced mobility or those traveling with bicycles or strollers. The new fleet is being co-financed with the European Union funding within the framework of the National Recovery and Resilience Plan for Poland. The new trains will operate on lines connecting Warsaw with neighboring towns and are to be built at the Stadler Poland factory in Siedlce. And that was all the news for this week. Feel free to write about interesting things happening in your cities, cause it helps to make these episodes much more engaging. Thanks for watching and see you next time.